Whether your beer is in a bottle, can, or glass, kick back and relax. It's better on draft.
Welcome, everybody. Episode 310 of the Better on Draft podcast. My name is Ken. Thank you so much for joining us at our brand new 7:15 p.m. Eastern start time. I am going to go around and see what everybody is drinking. First, with myself, I have got a Kolsch from the brewery Schlafly. Rob, what do you got over there?
And starting at 7:15, almost felt like we're doing a little TBS. We're going to start things at 7:05, but I've got myself a Shorts Thirst Mutilator, which is basically a hop water infused with lemon lime flavor.
Perfect for dry January. Danny, what do you got?
The Bellweiser from Bellwoods Brewing out of Toronto, I believe.
And Daniel over in Arizona.
Hey, since I am doing dry January till the 26th, I'm drinking me Liquid Death sparkling water.
I'm laughing, but that's not the first time that I've done dry January until the end of January for a specific event that we attended. Well, we do have in our studio right now online a guest. Why don't you say hello? Tell us who you are, what you do, and what you're drinking.
Hi, everybody. I'm Fran Caradonna. I'm the CEO of the St. Louis Brewery, known for Schlafly beers, and I am drinking a Schlafly Just a Bit Hazy IPA, one of our fastest growing beers that we've got right now, and very tasty. No dry January for me, maybe just a little dampness here and there.
Well, let's bring that up just real quick. As you are in one of the tap houses, you guys have multiple tap rooms over in the Midwest, the St. Louis and Illinois area. Do you guys service non-alcoholic drinkers there? What do you guys give out or offer while they are there?
We do. We are currently partnering with Well-Being Brewing Company, and we have all their beers. This is a new brand that we made for them. It's called Match Day Light, 35 calories. It's very similar to our pale ale recipe-wise, without the alcohol. And that'll be my second beer after my hazy IPA. So we serve all of the Well-Being brands. They have an IPA and a couple of different wheats and an amber. All very good.
And if you guys have not heard, you can actually go back to episode 263. It's from July of last year. We had Tom Halaska on from Wellbeing to learn all about that brewery. But we are here with Fran to talk about Schlafly. Am I saying that right? I'm self-conscious now after saying it wrong for a good month and a half.
We have one of our taglines is Schlafly, hard to say, easy to love. So you're not alone. It is hard to say. Schlafly. But if you just say Schlafly, we know what you mean.
All right. It almost sounds like shellacking. So I think that's how I'm gonna start it off as Schlafly. Now, you started your career not with beer, but with brewing when you worked at O'Fallon Brewery. Based on what I saw with your LinkedIn, are you still with them? And what are you doing with O'Fallon currently? And what did you do?
Well, the story actually goes back a little bit before O'Fallon, when my partner and then husband, Tony Caradonna, started a little small beer distributorship in St. Louis in 1990, which was about almost 2 years before Schlafly was founded. And I kept my day job, and he went around the Midwest and found breweries and he said, hey, can I sell your beer in St. Louis? And so he picked up a few brands along the way. One of them that he picked up was a beer called Pete's Wicked Ale, which some of you might be old enough to remember. And then eventually Schlafly opened up after Signature Beer had been around for a couple of years. And we eventually got the distribution rights to Schlafly, and we partnered with Schlafly from about 94 to about 99 to help distribute Schlafly packaged beer throughout St. Louis. And so I was actually working very closely with our friends from Schlafly back in the 90s before 2000. Eventually, a big distributor, major brands came along and picked us up, and we took the profits from Signature Beer and we started O'Fallon Brewery. Am I echoing?
No, that's one of our co-hosts. We'll make sure that
that's fine.
That's not you.
Okay.
Yep. So I guess my question to you, at least to start off with, for craft beer, because the 90s are way different than the 2000s, than even the 2010s to current post-COVID craft beer. I have a very deep question to ask you before I pass this off to Dan, which is, what is something that you think we could learn from the 90s micro or craft beer scene that you think could improve in today's product or today's business model for craft beer?
That's a really good question. And the answer is stay close to your customers. Listen to the people who love your beer, and they will tell you what they want to drink. Right now, they're telling us they want to drink more non-alcoholic stuff. They don't want to drink only non-alcoholic stuff. They want to drink more non-alcoholic stuff. And I think that in the wonderful, beautiful, broad expansion that happened after 2010, when consumers embraced us fully in a way that they hadn't in the previous 10 years, we got caught up in finding the next shiny thing. What's the shiny thing that everyone's going to want? Let's quick throw it out there. Is it a juicy hazy? Is it what is the thing that everybody wants? And that's okay, but I think it's real easy to forget to stop and listen to your customers and find out what it is they want to drink and pay attention to it. So I think as we're going into a contraction, which we are, everybody knows that sales for 2022, craft beer sales were off 5 to 7% across the country. It's a good time to remember to listen to our customers. So we've been through these contractions before, and we'll go through them again, and we'll survive. But always listen to the people. They love our products, and if we listen to them, they will guide us properly.
I want to bring something up real quick that you mentioned about chasing the next greatest thing. We've had breweries on here that mention that they specifically do that. So I actually love hearing that you don't specifically do that, because it kind of feels like a sellout. Like hearing someone say they're looking for the 95th variant of a juicy lactose, IPA it's terrible. Like other people want to drink other things as well. So I really love hearing that. Just want to throw that out there. You took an interesting route to get to the beer industry. I saw you worked at PBS previously.
Yep.
Working in TV, that's something Ken Schramm also did. That really stuck out in my mind. So what is it about craft beer? What brought you there and has kept you there for as long as it has?
Well, beer is fun. I mean, it's TV, public TV is pretty fun, but beer is really fun. And I also love small business. I get into making the business part work. And, I frequently talk about being in the beer business, because a lot of people are passionate about beer, but they don't want it to be their career or their livelihood or their work. They want it to be their passion and their fun. I kind of like the business end of beer as much as I like beer. And the older I've gotten, the less beer I can enjoy. It's just a fact of life. Don't get old because you won't be able to drink as much beer, or do get old, you won't be able to drink as much beer. But I like making something and sharing it with people who like it too. And I think I'm probably the same as the lady who opens up a muffin shop, or the guy who's roasting his own coffee. There's something about making a product and sharing it with customers who it's more than a sales transaction, and beer is just such it's a historic product, been around since the beginning of human time, practically. It brings us together. I always say to our team, people are having an experience when they're using our product, and it's usually a high emotion experience. And it's most of the time a really happy experience. You get together and share beers with your friends and your family for the good times, also the bad times, but mostly the good times. So it's hard for me to think of another product to wrap my head around business-wise that's also fun. And, it's not like selling auto parts or something like that,
Yeah.
If we're not having fun, we're doing something wrong here.
Yeah, absolutely true. Now, being the CEO of the brewery, tell us a little bit about what that entails. Do you have your hands in the day-to-day brewing or anything like that? Tell us about what you do on a daily basis there.
In a company the size of Schlafly, which has about 275 employees, we have 4 pub operations, we have 2 separate brewing operations. My role is very much about coaching the people who do the real work here. My role is much more of a coach. So there's 6 people who report to me that in various ways run the business. And we work together as a senior team to manage the business. And I work with each of them individually, mostly as a coach. The thing that I think I bring to this company at this stage in its life and at this stage in my life is that I have physically done almost every job there is. I've not been a line cook. That's the one job, or a dishwasher. But I've been a bartender. I've been a server. I've bussed tables. I've brewed. I've packed. I've mucked out the mash tun. At some varying point along the way, I've done all that stuff on a much smaller scale. But I've also ordered the grain, ordered the packaging. I've done all the accounting, on a really small scale. So I can bring what I know about the operations to the business. And that helps me be a better coach to the people that are doing the job, even though they're doing it on a much larger scale than I ever physically did it myself. I brewed 15-barrel batches one at a time. And Schlafly, it works on them. And I hand bottled, or at one point we had a little 6-head Maheen, and I worked on that machine for a little bit. But I think they know that I've walked the walk that they walk now in some sort of form. And I think that gives me a little bit of credibility. The other thing is, I have 30 solid years in craft beer and another 10 or 15 years of just working life. And, most of the people I work with are quite a bit younger than I am. And so I have that to bring. I can share all my mistakes with them, and hopefully they can learn from some of those too. So,
hey, Dan, can I just interject really, really quick?
Yeah,
I just want to make one
absolutely.
quick comment. It's refreshing to know that there are people in your role as a CEO of whether it's a brewery or even a Fortune 500 company, that there are people out there such as yourself that can honestly say that they've walked the line and they've done the work, because I don't think we see that enough, whether it's in the small business world or dare I even say corporate America as a whole. And I just wanted to say that I respect that and I appreciate everything you just said. It's a breath of fresh air for me. I just wanted to throw that out there, Dan. I'm sorry. I had to fanboy that.
Well, I appreciate. I got to say one other thing that I am very fortunate. We are all very fortunate, which is that the owners of this company, the Schlafly family, are committed to this organization as an institution in St. Louis. They see this as a legacy that they want to leave to the community. And one of the most important things is to them, of course, we have to make a profit, don't get me wrong, but the driving force isn't about making a profit. It's about being a productive corporate community citizen. And I mean, it doesn't get any better than that when you go to work every day. And I think all 275 of us who work here appreciate that attitude about the company we work for and the people who drive it. And it gives us the opportunity to really serve people in a positive way. So we're lucky.
Yeah, Nick, I was actually going to say something pretty similar, so I'm glad you jumped in and did that, because I think a lot of people, I think, respect that.
Yeah.
Now, I noticed you're currently distributed in, if I counted correctly, it's 14 states. What are your plans currently? Are you planning on expanding further, or what's the situation with that?
Yeah, we're always looking at strategic markets. That's certainly something that has changed over the years. Schlafly, O'Fallon and Schlafly grew up kind of right next to each other. Schlafly was started in late 91, early 92, and we started O'Fallon in 2000. And Schlafly was first and has always been biggest in St. Louis. And Schlafly has owned St. Louis. O'Fallon, we were always number 2 to Schlafly's number 1. And Schlafly's business, I get my we's mixed up sometimes because I worked at O'Fallon and I work at Schlafly, and sometimes I don't know who we are, but Schlafly owned St. Louis, and 90% of Schlafly's business for 20 years was in the state of Missouri and within 50 miles of St. Louis. O'Fallon quickly expanded to about 15 states in the first 10 years of its life. And at that time, we could go to cities like Detroit, like Chicago, like Cleveland, Ohio, and the whole across the Midwest, Indianapolis. And they didn't have a lot of local breweries. So wholesalers were looking for craft brands from the Midwest. Schlafly didn't do that the same way. And in about 2010, as more local breweries popped up across the Midwest, O'Fallon's out-of-state business started contracting. And so what we have today is we have some markets where a regional brand like Schlafly fits, and fewer markets where it still fits. They have to be kind of big markets. We have a presence in the DC, Baltimore area. We have a presence in the New York, New Jersey area. And I think they're highly populated areas. We recently came into Michigan. What a great beer loving state you are. And we're really happy to be working with the Socolas at Imperial, because we know they know how to distribute all different kinds of beer. O'Fallon was with Imperial way back in the early 2000s. So we will look for markets to expand to, but I think they're very strategic. Like going into Michigan was a strategic decision. And there's a few major metros out there that we're taking a look at, but choosing the right market and the right wholesale partner is a really critical part of that. And we're not going to rush into it. We've really got to make the right decision so that it works for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And one more question I have for you before I pass it off to Rob here. You had mentioned about the current contraction of craft beer here that's going on right now, especially with things like seltzers, with RTDs, things like that out there. Are you worried this isn't a temporary contraction and that we are seeing the shrinkage as far as the craft beer industry goes?
I think it's probably not a temporary contraction. I mean, I don't think it'll be like over in 6 months. The way I think inflation probably is going to ease more soon. But I think it's probably a healthy contraction. I don't know if that makes sense. It doesn't mean it's not painful. It just means the contraction is consumers telling me there's too much. There's too many choices. We don't want all this anymore. And so sometimes the truth hurts. And the truth is, we grew as a segment beyond demand. And that's just a reality we have to. So it doesn't worry me because I see what it is, and we just have to adjust. And one of the things we've done at Schlafly is expand a little bit on our hospitality business and focus more on the, our own premise business. And that sort of balances things out. But we're probably never going to be a 60,000 barrel brewery again. I mean, maybe, but we learn how to exist and be a profitable, growing company. I like to say to the team, growth is not just a size thing. We all want to grow. We don't want to get bigger all the time though, right? I don't want to keep getting bigger. We want to get smarter. We want to get faster. We want to get stronger, and companies can grow without necessarily getting bigger. And I think that is the critical piece of reacting in a contraction, is finding ways to grow without depending just on volume and revenue growth.
Now, I will say that as far as that, I'm not sure, I don't think it was mentioned, but in terms of that distribution map, that Ohio was added in there too. Yeah. So as those of us in Michigan love to joke that the only thing Ohio is good for is driving through it. It's not completely that. There's a lot of good breweries that are out there. There's some good amusement parks, but as there is the rivalry with our colleges from our state to theirs, that it is definitely a bit of a bullying mentality that goes between two states. So that +1 for Michigan on you on that one.
You should drive right through Ohio and come to St. Louis. There you go. How about that?
That actually kind of brings me to my first question here. Basically, with you guys being Schlafly being the first craft brewery in St. Louis and being there, having been there for such an established period of time, is there a feeling of being kind of the parent to all of these brewery kids that have popped up around you? And, as you were talking about, listening to the consumer, what kind of challenges do you have with having to try and produce what the consumers want when there is the selection of choice in the St. Louis area and having to essentially fight with them for competition?
Yeah. I would say it's less like a parent and more like a big sister. Schlafly's been around a long time, but someday I'm going to figure out a way to track down all the alumni, all the former employees who worked at Schlafly and now work at other breweries all over the country, probably all over the world. There's so many, they're everywhere. And I've always felt it's important for us as a craft beer community to work together because our customers, differently than domestic beer customers, our customers are not loyal to our breweries. They are loyal to our category. By definition, craft beer drinkers love variety. They want to try different beers. And so it's in our best interest to work together and support one another. A rising tide lifts all boats and all that jazz. So we've worked together. Now that doesn't mean we don't compete. You can collaborate and still compete, friendly competition. Of course, we want to get a tap handle. But we recognize that there's plenty of business for all of us. And that's hard for people to hear me say, but I believe that's true. We just have to find our own specialty and our own niche. And for Schlafly, there's the fact that we've been around for 30 years. We've been doing this a long time. Nobody can beat our quality. There's plenty of people whose quality is as good as ours, but we are known for the quality of our beer and the predictability of our beer and our recipes. But our shtick is that we make beer brewed to style. So if you get a pale ale, it's going to taste like a pale ale. And so people know what they get with us. We do have a lot of fun with special releases and that sort of thing, and we'll continue to do that. But we like to collaborate with the other folks and the other brewers, and I think we have to as a community of craft brewers together. So I don't know if that answers your question, Rob. Does it?
Yeah, that does. And I mean, it actually was going, you kind of answered what was going to be my follow-up question, because I was kind of curious about, the feeling of pride of being open so long. You guys have been open for, I believe, for one thing that I saw, that you guys, the first tap room opened December 26th, 1991.
That's correct. We just celebrated 31 years. 31
years. So, at that time, there was approximately only, I think it was about 322 craft breweries that were open, and we've surpassed 9,000. And to be able to have the quality and the product to still be kicking at 31 is always impressive. I mean, we have our breweries that are here that have been in that same scenario with Bell's and Bell's being around for so long until now they've sold off to Lion, I believe. But yeah, that is just amazing to see. We're still growing, and Schlafly is still kicking ass. So that is awesome. But there was one question I wanted to kind of go into, because with being in St. Louis, obviously you've been in the business for a while. Like you already stated, you started the beer distributorship with Signature Beer Company, had O'Fallon in 2000, and then obviously moving to CEO here at Schlafly in 2019. Kind of going back to the 1990s, in a time where craft beer was still kind of in its young post Jimmy Carter-ish era. I guess tell us about creating a craft beer business in an area where Anheuser-Busch was so dominant that basically they could have been having babies around that time saying Budweiser as their first words.
Yeah. Well, that's a really good point. I think we were behind the rest of the country on craft for the first 10 or 15 years. St. Louis was. And I think one of the reasons Schlafly was the only, and next to only brewery, there were only four breweries in St. Louis for 20 years. And we had to do, in this market especially, we had to do a lot of education about what is a craft beer, because people understood beer. This community is extremely loyal to Anheuser-Busch for reasons I think we don't even remember as a community of people. And during Prohibition, Anheuser-Busch kept their brewery open, kept people employed, kept families eating during a very difficult time when a lot of breweries just shut down and laid all their people off. Anheuser-Busch kept the community working. And I think, it's almost in this town's DNA to be loyal to that kind of company. So people understood not just the company, but the industry of beer. And so craft didn't make sense. And they'd say, well, what is a microbrewery? And you'd say, it's a little tiny brewery. And they'd say, well, why is it different? Is this beer going to taste like Budweiser? And we would have to explain to them that this is beer like Budweiser, but it's brewed on a really small basis in a small batch with special ingredients. And there's the brewer over there. Isn't that cool? You can see the guy who makes it. And it took years of educating people. And as we looked at the little tiny sliver of the beer market that craft beer had back in the day, whatever the national segment of the market, the national craft beer share of market was 5%. In St. Louis, it was 2.5%. We were always half of the rest of the world. And I remember being at a craft brewers conference back in I think it was about 98 or 99. And I heard Kim Jordan, she was the keynote speaker. And founder of New Belgium. And she was talking about the possibility of craft beer's market segment growing. And I remember her saying, maybe someday we'll get to 5%, but we're going to have to work really hard to get there. I mean, that's how tiny craft beer was, and now we're well over 15%, or we were before the decline. So anyway, it made St. Louis a difficult place to compete in for many years. However, once people generally came to understand what craft beer is, along about 2010, when it exploded, St. Louis became one of the best markets for craft beer. And I think we can attribute that in large part to the fact that there's beer culture because Anheuser-Busch was here. And St. Louis was named, I think, 2 years in a row by USA Today as the best beer market in the country, the best place to get a beer in the country. I've been told by people from Europe that St. Louis is known as the beer capital of the US, if not the world. And we have 60 small breweries in the metro of St. Louis. I think that's a little outsized for the size of our community relative to other major markets. It is a great place to make and drink beer. And I think a lot of that is because of Anheuser-Busch and their legacy of beer appreciation that our citizens understand.
Oh, all right. One more before I pass it off to Danny. I guess the question will be short. We'll see how long the answer is. But this is kind of for people who want to get into starting their own craft brewery business. Which is harder, making the beer that people want or managing the beer business?
The hardest part is selling the beer. That's the hardest part.
Huh?
Making the beer, and I don't want to diminish how hard it is to make high quality, good beer consistently over and over, because that's not an easy thing to do. But selling beer, getting your beer, we have a 3-tier system. So you got to sell it to a wholesaler who then sells it to a retailer, or you have to open up a pub, essentially a restaurant, and sell it direct to consumers, which that is its own kettle of fish. So selling the beer is the hardest part to me. A brewer might tell you a different story.
Gotcha. On to you, Danny.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. I'm so impressed by your history. Women in beer has not been like a steady increase uphill. It's been tough. And I'm going to school for brewing and distillation. So I'm so eager to talk to anybody who's been in this industry for a long time. And I just wonder, for you've done all the things. You've stirred the mash, you've bought the grain, you've gone on sales, you've brewed the beer, you've served the beer. So how did you learn this stuff? Was it just by having to do it? Was there any sort of formal training that you had? Like, how did you find how did you learn?
Entirely self-taught and taught by others. We got a lot of help from our fellow brewers in St. Louis when we were actually making beer. But, I learned the distribution part. I learned the compliance part. I learned that the hard way, trial and error, paying our excise taxes and things like that. I learned by doing. And because we were very small and growing, I was able to do that. And I was the only female in the room for decades. And, a lot of women today in a lot of industries were the only women in the room for a lot of years. I've learned that if you just do the work and do your best work, and people eventually don't pay attention to what your gender is, fortunately. And there's a lot more of us out here. My senior team has 2 men on it and 4 women. And we have, Schlafly has had a female brewer on staff since the 2nd or 3rd year that was making beer. So I'm very fortunate to be in an organization that values female leadership.
That is really fortunate and encouraging and refreshing. Thank you for being a part of it.
Thank you.
Nick?
Thanks, Danny. I apologize because I was supposed to ask questions earlier, but I had a little bit of an explosion with my beer over here.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, not very good. I want to go back because this really, really fascinated me. Your role as CEO of Schlafly. I actually had to practice that 10 times before I came on. What is the most difficult part for being CEO of a brewery? We get owners, we get brewers, we get sales folks, we get the marketers, the social media folks, the distributors, we get everyone in between. We get owners on occasion, but to be CEO of a fairly large brewery in a city, as you mentioned, Fran, 60 different breweries next to Big Brother, AB InBev, or Anheuser-Busch. What is the most difficult part of being CEO of a brewery of this size when you have almost 300 employees that you're responsible for? What's one of the most difficult things for you?
For me, the most difficult part is managing my time effectively and staying organized, because and not doing something that somebody else can do. It's so easy for me to pick up someone else's job and start doing it, because in a lot of cases I've done it before, and they can do it better than I can. It's just not necessary for me. So discerning sometimes what is mine to do and what is other, but that's probably the hardest thing for me. I have been such a hands-on manager for most of my career, and this is the first time where I have a job where I really don't have to do anything, literally. If I leave, the place keeps going if I'm not here. And I've always been in small organizations where if I left, then there were certain tasks that didn't happen until I got back. And so this is a different kind of role. And it really, for someone like me who's worked as long as I have, it's a chance to share my experience, and help other people grow. And it's like being a baseball coach in a lot of ways. Why don't you choke up a little bit and see if that works better for you, or whatever it is. So I think that's the hard part for me, is managing my time and recognizing what I should be doing versus letting somebody else to do.
So I'm in a leadership role at my work. I have, I'm gonna get yelled at if I can't even remember how many people report to me. Like, we'll call it a dozen, but a dozen folks or so. And I have represented employees and I have non-represented employees. And it's so easy for me to just pick it up and just do it. And right. I have to constantly remind myself that, okay, you are not doing anyone any favors by doing this yourself.
That's right.
Yeah. And so I'm glad I'm not alone in that.
Me too.
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm not alone.
Well, I only have a dozen people, and some of them are students. So, but you got a lot more. You got a lot of career folks that you're responsible for. So, it's just nice to know that I'm not alone in that world. I'm kind of was looking through your LinkedIn. You went to the University of South Carolina.
Yeah, I'm a Gamecock.
You're a Gamecock. I went to a D2 school, Go Warriors of Wayne State. But you got your degree in journalism. Is there anything that you learned in your undergrad that even got you remotely prepared to lead a brewery of whether it's O'Fallon or Schlafly? Is there anything that you were able to take from those experiences? Because we get engineers that start breweries. We get business folks that end up owning a brewery. I don't think we've ever had someone who had a journalism background.
I know.
Basically being number one in a brewery. Is there anything that you've learned that you were able to get from your undergrad experience that got you ready or at least made you a little bit more prepared to take on this role?
The only thing that comes to mind, the reason I chose journalism, I was undeclared. I was an undeclared major as long as they would let you be an undeclared major. And then they said, okay, you got to declare. You got to make a decision. And I chose journalism because it had the least requirements inside the major. So you could take all these other humanities and, history and stuff like that. But I think the thing I learned in the journalism school that is a skill and it's even more than a skill. It's almost a character trait, which is curiosity. And I learned how to ask questions in journalism school. I learned how to really think and write. I learned my basic writing skills, communicating skills in journalism school. And I learned that if you don't think clearly, you can't write clearly. And so, I think people can learn that stuff in every major that you have, but in journalism in particular, we focus on that.
Okay. Being communication key pretty much anywhere you go. As an engineer, my handwriting is terrible, so that's why I rely on typing. So if I can't communicate type wise, then everyone's in trouble. One last question, and I think it's one of my fun questions. I always come up with a fun question before I turn it over to Ken. Not beer related. I'm not sure how big of a baseball fan you are, but in St. Louis, I think it's a pretty big deal. You got the Cardinals. Albert Pujols just played his last league season in the majors, and he finished it in St. Louis, where he basically spent almost his entire career for the most part. How does St. Louis do in the upcoming season? Do you think they're going to win the division, or do you think they'll slip a little bit?
I'm not a Cardinals fan.
Oh, what?
I am.
To those that are not watching this, she's got up from her desk. Oh, she's a Cubbies fan. Oh, no.
My whole family is ashamed of that, so don't tell them I just showed you that. But my kids grew up watching Albert Pujols, and they were there when he set his record in St. Louis. And I am a Cardinals fan in the sense that I appreciate who they are to this community. I don't follow the Cardinals the way I follow the Cubs. And I'm mad at the Cubs right now. So I didn't follow them last year because they've, gutted the team, and we just won't go there right now. But ultimately, I am a Cardinals fan unless they're playing the Cubs, and then I'm a Cubs fan. And I'm always a Cubs fan, even if they're playing the Cardinals. So there.
Fair enough. I like it. I love it. I absolutely love that. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Ken. Ken, go ahead.
All right. I got a few questions before we get into our final questions of the night. First of all, I crushed this Kolsch that you guys create. This was smooth, easy to drink, and at 4.8%. This is definitely going to be in my rotation of the nice, easy to drink when I want to have a beer, but not a bunch of beers, and not feel like I have to crack open one of like my 12 or 14 percenters. What kind of flavors did I just get in this Kolsch? Like, what are the tasty notes from it? And my follow-up question, and this is more for one of our previous hosts, Matt Bush, can you add any adjuncts to a Kolsch and still be considered a Kolsch?
I'd have to ask one of my brewing experts that. My instinct is no. I'm a fan of the Reinheitsgebot, which says if it doesn't have barley, water, hops, or yeast in it, it ain't beer. And sometimes wheat. Isn't that what they? I think it's barley, water, hops, yeast, and sometimes
barley,
wheat.
water, hops.
Do they say no wheat?
I believe when they first did Reinheitsgebot, it wasn't yeast because they didn't know yeast existed.
No, I said wheat.
Oh, wheat.
Yeah.
Maybe. Go, Danny.
Yeah, I think if you have a little bit of wheat, they'll still call it really beer. But the point is, it can't have rice or corn or something like that. So yeah, I don't know. The story behind that Kolsch is that Tom Schlafly, some number of years ago, met his wife to be, and she was from Cologne, Germany, which is where, and I can't remember the name of the brewery right now, but the brewery that originated the style and the yeast, they actually gave us yeast, and we still use that yeast today to make that beer. So that Kolsch beer was Tom and Ulrika's wedding beer all those years ago, and people loved it so much that we've made it one of our everydays, and it is crushable, isn't it? In fact, I think Kolsch may be my favorite beer style. People often say, what's your favorite beer? And I say, that's like asking me which child is my favorite child, and I refuse to answer that question. But some days it's this one and some days it's that one, but the Kolsch style to me is such a drinkable, but yet full tasting beer, So anyway, I think it's really special yeast, and that's partly what comes through, and that's partly what you must have liked, Ken.
Awesome. Now, when we think of the Midwest, we don't necessarily think of oysters, but you guys take part in the Stout and Oyster Festival. Before we sign off, why don't you give us a little bit of information on the Stout and Oyster Festival, what it is, how did it become a thing, and why is it in the Midwest?
So back in the day, Dan Kottman and Tom Schlafly, the founders of the brewery, they said, we want to make good beer and throw great parties. And there's nothing to motivate the genesis of a great party than a slow time of the year in the tap room. And so they came up with the idea, I don't know, it's probably been 20, 25 years ago, to fly in some oysters in March, and they brewed up some stout beer to go with it. And they said to everybody, hey, come have some oysters and stout. And the rest is history. It has grown into the largest stout and oyster, really oyster festival in the Midwest that we know about anyway. And it will be the last weekend in March. I think it's the 23rd and 24th. I don't have my calendar up in front of me. And we'll have music. We're flying in 60,000 shells. We'll have several dozen shuckers from all over the country here, professional shuckers shucking oyster. We'll have oysters on the half shell. We'll have oysters Rockefeller. We'll have oyster stew. We'll have oyster poor boys. And we will have many kinds of stout, some that you can only get this year and this time. We make a different batch of stouts, all different kinds, along with our usual coffee stout, oatmeal stout, some of the regular export stout, Irish stout that we make all the time. But we'll also do some special, there'll probably be some barrel-aged beers. And it is a really fun party. And you can come and eat one oyster and one beer. There's no ticket. It's free. You just come and buy the beer as you go, buy the oysters as you go. So you don't, you can come and stay for a half hour. You can come and stay all day. It's rain or shine. And I think it would be really worth driving through Ohio to come to the Stout and Oyster Fest.
We do have to go through Indiana as well, which is that's
Is it as bad as Ohio?
I don't think it's as bad.
The quickest way to St. Louis is actually through Illinois. You don't have to go through either.
Oh,
Dan,
oh wait, you do have to go through you do have to go through part of Indiana. I'm sorry about that 40 miles.
I was gonna say, Dan, if you could have shown me how to get from Michigan to Illinois without going through Indiana or another state, I would have been shocked.
Yeah, I forgot about that little corner. You got to go through Gary, which is a lovely town. So if you do go through there, make sure to stop by.
That is going to do it. Let's go through the final questions. This is the final question before we give you the opportunity to help us figure out where we can get Schlafly in our stores and in our beer glasses. Let's start with Rob. Rob, what's your final question for the night?
Final question would be, it doesn't have to be all time. So we'll just say one of your top 5 favorite books of all time.
Gone with the Wind.
That was pretty fast. That might be even a top 3 or a top 1 for her.
Catcher in the Rye. I love Catcher in the Rye. Don't get me started.
I am particular to, mine is Count of Monte Cristo.
Oh, that's a good one too. Yeah.
I like The Outsiders, just saying.
Yeah.
That was a
Stay
good
gold.
Stay gold, pony boy.
Stay gold.
Well, Nick, what's your final question?
Well, you got AB InBev in town. I'm sure there's some big macro breweries that you like to partake in every once in a while. What is your guilty pleasure when it comes to beer? Just one beer. Guilty pleasure.
Guilty pleasure. The one macro beer that I drink when it is a hot summer day at the beach, and I don't really consider it beer, it's more like hydration, is a Silver Bullet Coors Light.
Oh, okay. All right. Ken, many Thursday nights, remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Coors Light? Yeah. Many a Thursday night.
$5 pitchers, can't go wrong. Dan, what's your final question?
All right. So speaking of Illinois, you are a border town there and have a number of tap rooms. Has there ever been talks to expand into East St. Louis? And if the answer is no, why haven't you?
We are in Illinois, actually. Last January, we opened a small pub in Highland, Illinois, which is only about 25 short miles from East St. Louis.
No plans to open to downtown East St. Louis, though?
No, probably not, although I understand the real estate's probably cheap.
Yeah, I'm sure it's probably free. You can just set up shop.
It's actually the tap room where I'm sitting right now is probably less than 2 miles from East St. Louis, just across the river. We're right downtown. So the reason we wouldn't do that is because it's too close to this tap room, probably.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to do something where you partner and get yourself in at the DraftKings at Casino Queen. Mix a little Schlafly with some casino games.
It sounds like the voice of experience. Maybe you've...
I tell you what, Dan and I, we went to Vegas this year, and the amount of breweries that we hit in Vegas, which was really, really nice, but going to the Chicago brewery in the Four Queens is probably one of the nicest things to have, is having a nice, good craft brewery in a major casino. So
yeah,
I think cool. You got an opportunity there. Danny, what's your final question?
Yes. Have you had much Michigan beer, like craft beer? And what would you wish you could get there where you are all the time?
I probably could have answered that question better back in the day when I drank more beer than I drink today. I've always been a big fan of Bell's. And I remember when we couldn't get Bell's, now we can, and I'm grateful that we can. But we used to get a cherry beer from Michigan. Does anybody remember a cherry beer?
And Bell's had a cherry stout.
It was before Bell's.
I think Perrin's got their cherry IPA. That might have a decent distro hit over there.
I bet one of your listeners might remember. This is a signature beer. We're back in the 90s now. It was a company, and their claim to fame was a cherry beer, and it came from Michigan. I'm going to have to.
It might be.
I might have to reach out.
From Michigan Brewing Works, which had a decent distro. There was a few breweries that no longer exist. That had a decent distro, including Big Buck had a decent distro size. So yeah, if it's from the 90s and it's not a Bell's beer, or maybe Atwater, it's going to be hard to look for sure.
Yeah, I bet somebody at Imperial remembers, or I might have to reach out to the X and see if he remembers the name of it. But yeah, that was a good beer. That was a really good beer.
All right, Fran, my final question for you is one that I've been enjoying asking a lot of our guests. What is the one beer game that you think you could crush your entire 270 plus staff in? Darts, bowling, beer pong. Are you a secret beer pong goddess there, Fran?
Yeah, back in the day, boy, I'm a terrible bowler. I get lucky at darts sometimes. And usually the beer makes me better. Beer pong, not so much anymore. I'm not that good at beer pong anymore. So yeah, you know what though? I can train. I can train to beat them all.
All right, Fran, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you taking the time. That's going to do it for us here at Better on Draft, episode 310. If you're listening live, stay tuned for the news segment. If you are listening via the podcast, of course, the news segment will come out Monday, January 16th. You can follow us on all of our social medias. That's Twitter, Untapped, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, and Facebook, all Better on Draft. Find us on betterondraft.com. Join us in the Michigan Craft Beer Discord in the links below all of our show notes. Of course, you can join Tavor, folks. Tavor is back in Michigan. Use the code BetterOnDraft when you re-sign up for Tavor here in Michigan. And no matter what you think of your beer, we think it's Better on Draft. Have a good night.